Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, special guests. I'm using today's update as sort of a little practice on a presentation I'm going to be doing at a conference coming up shortly. It'll be part of a presentation that I've designed for a panel discussion about growing some unusual grapes here in the mountains. Most people aren't aware that we have a native grape that grows in this region called the muscadine. Of the 300 varieties of muscadines in the world, it's the only cold-hardy muscadine in the world. The viticulture world was unaware that it even existed up until several years ago when we started propagating it, or should say learning how to propagate that. So I thought I'd give you an update. The reason this is important because this particular muscadine has some characteristics that make it unique in the viticulture world. For example, it's disease resistant. And what that means is you don't have to be spraying it with all kinds of fungicides and herbicides and pesticides and so forth. It's a native grape. It has a built-in natural immunity for all kinds of things. So the other thing that makes it very interesting is it's cold hardy. It grows here in the mountains. All of the other varieties of cold hardy muscadines that exist, there aren't any. There's only one, this one. But when you talk about muscadines and scuppernongs, you're talking about a series of grapes or varieties of grapes that grow from Texas to Florida up to eastern Maryland, and they're all hot weather, high humidity grapes. This is the only cold hardy grape that grows. It has established market recognition. When Jeannie and I were traveling in Italy, as soon as we said we're from North Carolina, the Italians would say in French and Italian, "Oh, that's where the muscadines grow." So it has an international recognition, which makes it very nice. It also has a unique aroma and flavor, as you know. Muscadine is quite unique from Concords or Niagaras or anything else. It's very useful for making pies, juice, table grapes, jams, preserves, and so forth. In fact, we have identified over 150 different varieties of products that can be made using grapes as a raw material. So it's a great candidate for replacement for tobacco in the mountains. Okie dokie. Unfamiliarity with the clicker and the AV equipment, it always helps. Okay. So one of the secrets of making a commercially available grape is figuring how to propagate the grapevine. Catua muscadines requires a very interesting process called greenwood cuttings. Most vines in the world, you can cut a cane about so big and stick it in the ground and water it and it'll grow a vine. No problem. You try to do that with muscadines and you get less than 1% success rate. That's not acceptable for a commercial venture. So I had to figure out how to do this. It took us 3 years of work to figure this out. We have to start with greenwood cuttings, not just cutting a cane, but cutting a little tiny piece well into the season when the cane's fully leafed out. It's a greenwood cutting. And knowing how to select the portion of the cane that's suitable for greenwood cutting is also an experienced thing that we figured out. There's also a rooting hormone that you have to select to make this work. We discovered there's a big difference between the performance on propagation success rates if you use powdered versus liquid rooting hormones. There's also a special support medium that we have to provide. That is, all it does is hold the little tiny rooted cutting straight up so it can be watered. There's no fertilizer, no nutrient value whatsoever. It's an expanded volcanic glass product that works. There's also a certain amount of time that has to be spent in this medium. There's also a root zone temperature. You have to put a heating pad underneath this and allow the temperature zone of the rooting area to be maintained at 86 degrees Fahrenheit for an extended period of time. There's also direct and indirect solar radiation considerations that have to be made. We discovered initially that we were letting him get way too hot, so we had to cut down the solar radiation. There's also airflow. The airflow, we discovered, is also very important in keeping the humidity down. If you don't have airflow through the greenhouse, the humidity builds up very, very quickly, as well as the heat. And there's also the water cycle timing. So these are some of the considerations, including the potting soil composition, that you want to consider whenever you are working with the propagation of these muscadines. We've also learned that the potting soil composition has to have certain type of mycorrhizae fungi in it in order to help make things grow faster and better. This is a picture of the expanded volcanic glass. It's very similar to the perlite material. You can see you have a thermometer here. This is also a heating probe in here for a thermocouple. These are some of the typical cuttings, greenwood cuttings. It's about a 7 or 8 inch long stick with one leaf on top. If the leaf is bigger than a silver dollar, you cut the leaf in half. So it really provides for a very, very interesting looking thing when you start propagating these. These are fresh ones that have been put in. This is what it looks like when you've got the whole bed full inside the greenhouse. Some of the ones that turned brown are the ones that didn't make it. We have about 80 to 85% success rate on the first rounds that we discovered working with these. After about 3 weeks in this particular environment, you'll see here the little teeny tiny leaves, little roots that start growing down here, and still the leaf stays looking relatively healthy. It's used all of the food in the xylem and inside the cane to produce these roots, or we call them rootlets. Once they get to be like this, here's another one. You can see where the roots actually start coming through the bark of the cane. If you use powder, it only comes out the very bottom, so you have a much higher success rate if you use a liquid. Here's what a whole pot of them looks like after they've been transferred out of the support medium into the potting soil. And the potting soil is a special mix that has this mycorrhizae fungi in there that makes the roots sort of explode into the pot and grow very, very quickly because it's able to pull up the nutrients so much faster. Here's a whole bunch of them after they've been in the pot for a while. You can see they're actually starting to grow more leaves. And now the roots are expanded out. Some of them we move into the pots from here into these types of pots, so they're much bigger. We label them while they're in the greenhouse so that we know which ones we're working with. We've been doing some experimenting with breeding on a cold hardy scuppernong, and the cold hardy scuppernong will be available probably in about 2 years or so. We've been working at that for several years now, but we label everything so we know what we're doing. You see these nice little healthy vines starting to grow. Once you take them out of these little pots, you can see all the roots that have come out of that as a result of the mycorrhizae fungi. So it really fills us up and makes a nice healthy plant. So we take them out of these little tiny potlets like this and put them into regular big pots like this, and we move them outside and put them on this bench so that they can, what we call, harden off. This gives them the chance to develop some comfortable environment, if you will, with it being at night, and there's no longer the greenhouse environment, the humidity is not there, the temperature is not there. And once they've been outside for about a week or so, then they're ready to sell. And we sell them, we put labels on the pots like this. These plants are ready to go into the field. Once they go into the field, it looks like this. This is one that's been taken right out of the greenhouse after the hardening off process and put into our vineyard. And after the end of the season, in the vineyard like this is where it's freshly planted. The plants start looking like this. This is approximately 3 feet high. The wire it goes up to is about 5 feet off the ground. And at that point, you start to train the vines to go out 10 feet in each direction from the base of the plant, and then you allow them to start producing grapes. And the grapes do look like this when they're ripe. They turn a real dark purple from a real pretty maroon. These, of course, the green ones are the ones that are not ripe yet, so you have to go through multiple picking in a season, 5 times, sometimes 6 times, as opposed to regular vines where you pick the whole cluster off, even though that whole cluster is not fully ripe. Typical leaves, typical grapes, typical seeds. What we're working on now is developing the information that comes out of what's inside. We're working with the AB Tech folks at the laboratory there, and also the Blue Ridge Food Ventures to start to develop some special value-added products that come from the muscadines. This is just one of 150 different products that you can make from the muscadines. Jeannie made this pie and entered it in a pie competition. I think Rick was there for that particular process. So what we're trying to do is get everybody introduced to the Catua muscadine. It's a unique product that we have in this part of the world. And all we can say is grow grapes and prosper. Madam Toastmaster.